Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer, and we are doing something a little bit different today. My good friend, Darren Williams, otherwise known as Daz Alt Theory on Twitter, has for several years now been doing a best of the prior year, early into January of the following year, on our mutual good friend, Mark Devlin's podcast, Good Vibrations. Mark Devlin is not available to do this interview this year, so we're doing this as like a joint cast. So this will also be airing as a podcast on Mark's Good Vibrations podcast. There will be a segment of this available for my patrons that will be full visuals and will be available at a later date on Mark's, probably for on audio podcast. We're not certain how that's going to go yet, but everything will be available to those who want to hear it. And I'm excited to have been tapped for the task of interviewing Darren on this I'm sure will be a very interesting and entertaining list. And I'm always happy to do a favor for my friend Mark. So anywho, welcome back, Darren. How you doing?
Thank you. Happy New Year to one and all. In this most weird of years already, 2021. But we will discuss that, I believe, Emily, possibly next year, because it's already gone mad in the first 10 days. Yeah. So for those of you that aren't aware, I was just an ordinary person, not an author, not a blogger, no YouTube channel. And I regularly got in communication with Mark Devlin, the host of the Good Vibrations podcast, available on Spreaker. The reason for this was due to me being a fan of 1990s hip hop and getting a magazine called Hip Hop Connection, in which Mark's name was front and center, as well as other magazines such as Mix Mag and DJ Magazine. Mm-hmm. So I then found out through the music Mark was into alternative theory. I then started conversation with him online via the music, meeting the alternative theory, and then we just became very good friends. I gave him my bits of information, my networking ability, and then he invited me to do a best of the previous year. And we've been doing this, I believe, since 2018, and it's become rather popular with the listeners of his Good Vibrations podcast, available on Spreaker. For the past 2 years, it's been hosted by JJ of the Operation JCD podcast, but unfortunately, JJ's going through some health issues at the moment. So I wanted to find somebody of an equal and brilliant mind to his, and I came across one, Miss Moyer. So I look forward to presenting the views and you to interject and elaborate. And for those that are listening, my main tip that I always give, it is all right for you if you are watching this on YouTube or Emily's Patreon, as well as Mark's podcast, to pause and then go to another tab and then look at what we're saying. The notes that I will be coming from, all 29 pages of it, will be available in the near future, possibly on some Gmail public forum that we've done in the past, where people can look in depth if they want to. The majority of the sources used come from the mainstream media. And one of the things that Emily has mentioned within her previous interviews is how the mainstream media will highlight something but not follow it through and act like it never happened. So I think you've used the term memory hole, I think, before to describe this, Emily. Yeah. So we're going to look at things that some people have known about, some people haven't. For those of you that want to know Brexit, for those of you that want to know American presidential election, for those of you that want to know Nixium, for those of you that want to know Ghislaine, for those of you that want to know about Beirut, those things have been extensively covered within the mainstream media. So I was going away from them things, whilst they are interesting, particularly what happened in Beirut. Again, it has been extensively covered. So what I've done is I've tended to go away from them things. So whilst I am not ignoring them, I am also leaving them. And also, how could I forget the Pentagon, the UFO revelations, etc. Again, they are extensive. You can go to Joe Rogan's podcast and he's got hours and hours of people talking about that revelation, including former CIA officers.
Yep.
So we will now start with the top 10, which Emily will do in a best Casey Kasem manner.
Okay, quickly before I do that, which I don't even have a clue what Casey Kasem sounds like, so I'm just going to make something up. But I find it interesting that you and I both do annual things with Mark Devlin. So one thing that a lot of people wouldn't know unless they listen to his musical podcast is that I do the voiceovers for his annual holiday time, end of the year music mix. So I do the voiceovers for that. You do his review of the year before things. So I think it's perfect we come together to do this, right? Anyway, all right, here we go. On to the list now. Coming in at number 10 on Darren's top 10 of 2020 countdown, how LinkedIn revealed potential plans for World War III. Number 9, the Umbrella Man. Number 8, the DEA was doing what? Number 7, Courtney Love. Of course, Courtney Love always pops up in the most unusual places. Number 6, a ghost in the Vatican machine. Number 5, that silly submarine. Number 4, Raised by Wolves, a hidden in plain sight pop culture event. Number 3, unusual weather within the UK. Number 2, Hillary Clinton's ownership of a very interesting book. And coming in at number 1, 2 Wuhan doctors become black. Darren Williams, take it away.
So at number 1, we will start with what I believed was the most WTF, unbelievable, shocking, perplexing, mind-bending story of 2020. And it begins in your most favorite place and mine, Wuhan, China. So 2 Wuhan hospital doctors, Dr. Wu Wenfeng and Dr. Wei Fan, both 42 years old, working out of the Wuhan Central Hospital, where COVID-19 was originally identified, eventually became critically ill with the virus, with Dr. Wenfeng eventually dying, with, according to reports, his colleague, Dr. Fan, making a full recovery. Yet what makes this fascinating are both changed skin colour, this transforming their natural skin complexion to that of sub-Saharan black. As this story gained attention within the Western mainstream media, another arrived regarding COVID-19 in China, this being overt racism towards black people living throughout the nation. An example of this being a fast food outlet branch of McDonald's in Guangzhou, being the second most populated place in China, that placed the following in English at the entrance of its restaurant. Notice, we've been informed that from now on, black people are not allowed to enter the restaurant. For the sake of your health, consciously notify the local police for medical isolation. Please understand the inconvenience caused. Police telephone number 110. Scientific evidence that the Office for National Statistics in the United Kingdom, commonly known as the ONS, which is a ministerial department which reports directly to the UK Parliament, revealed in May 2020 that black people are more than 4 times likely to die from COVID-19 than white people in Britain. Black people have a higher rate of infection along with death than any other group, including fellow ethnic minorities. Therefore, how can something from the geographic centre of China, this being Wuhan, impact people whom have ancestry from Africa? Did word leak out to the ordinary Joes and ordinary Janes on the streets of China that something unique was made to possibly wipe out the entire African diaspora, so that racist discrimination throughout their nation was based out of fear of COVID-19 actually being a bioweapon. The executive leadership of the Chinese Communist Party in early 2008 ordered a crackdown on hip-hop music due to being worried that their youth were becoming obsessed with African American culture. So this is a following quote from the president of the African Development Bank in part of a speech made at Iowa State University in October 2017. Africa holds the key for feeding 9 billion people that will be on the planet by 2050. Africa sits on 65% of uncultivated, arable land left in the world. So what Africa does with agriculture will determine the future of food in the world. Therefore, could the executive leadership of the Chinese Communist Party have ordered the creation of COVID-19 with a kill two birds with one stone methodology, in that they eliminate a section of humanity they believe are a negative influence on their future youth, then become the new homeowners of sub-Saharan Africa with all those natural resources along with potential. The reason why Dr. Hu Wenfeng and Dr. Wi-Fi turned black was everybody has sub-Saharan African DNA, either substantial along with small amounts. Therefore, the biowarfare specialists of the People's Liberation Army weren't as precise as they believed, therefore leading to substantial deaths in Iran, for example, a nation allied with China. Now, before I get to you, I have to give a disclaimer in a way. It is the belief of Mark Devlin that COVID-19 is an elaborate hoax and has been created as a means of corralling humanity into a new socio-economic viewpoint and frame and structure. An example of this being the eradication of the middle classes, which would result in a new digital feudalism in which we are given breadcrumbs whilst the elites buy up all the valuable real estate and resources, and we have a clear separation of both. So Mark gave an excellent speech in the city of Leeds this summer, in which he gave his views on what he believes COVID-19 to be. So as he is my friend and he is the host of this as a podcast, I have to put that out there, and I would recommend that people carefully listen to his views on what this is. What I would agree with Mark on, I believe the power structure, those that control the means of production, so to speak, are using whatever this is in terms of opportunism. Mm-hmm. And this comes from somebody called Rahm Emanuel, who was an advisor to Barack Obama and later became mayor of Chicago, whose brother is one of the major movers and shakers within Hollywood. And what Rahm Emanuel said is, you never allow a good crisis to go to waste.
Well, his other brother is also Zeke Emanuel, who was part of crafting Obamacare, I believe.
There you go.
Yeah.
So basically, we have a very powerful person. So I'm not saying Rahm Emanuel's behind this, but what I'm trying to say, audience, is that there is a psychology which is possibly definitely sociopathic, definitely psychopathic, that says that if a crisis comes along, use it to your advantage. To either the masses are distracted or the masses are feeling vulnerable and weak, and you can use this chaos as a ladder. So that's my belief in it. But one of the things the alternative research community has yet to look at is why Black people were overtly discriminated once the Chinese lockdown was lifted. So that was very interesting. And these two doctors, they went very dark skin, black, and their hair even was curly. So at first, the alternative research community said it was a fake and it was some sort of a jackass meeting Tom Green parody show, but it was later confirmed to be true. So that's my number one, 2 Wuhan doctors that became black.
Okay, a couple things. First of all, I couldn't find in there, but maybe I just was not understanding something. Are there any pictures of them appearing black?
Yeah, there's extensive mainstream media news articles. At first, it was ridiculing it,
Okay.
but then later on, once one of the doctors died, it showed the other doctor had returned back to his natural skin color. So we had gone natural skin color, some treatment that they used on both of them, in which he went black and his hair then went curly, and then after the treatments he went back to his native natural color. So what I believe it was the treatment is doing something with the DNA. So it's actually resetting the DNA to its most basic settings, which is sub-Saharan African.
Okay.
And then once it defeats it, the treatment stops and you go back to your natural hair and your natural skin color.
Okay, so I could go absolutely like wild and off in a million different directions with this one, but I'm going to keep it to just a few little things. I do think, like I'm going to start what you ended with and then work my way sort of back. So I think it's entirely possible for what you think and what Mark thinks to both be true, and this is how. For a long time, we experienced the kind of things in the United States and around the world that were like like crises that happened, that they took advantage of it, and they were always well prepared ahead of time to take advantage of these crises at the moment that they happen by already having bills, sort of that, written up that would match a situation like that or whatever. And then at a certain point, we began to, and I think it was for a very, very particular reason, which we're seeing right now, they began to do these things which were like, quote unquote, like hoaxes or drills that go live or slightly live or more hybrid kind of events to get people to begin this controversy over whether all of these things are fake or not, right? Because they knew at a certain moment they're going to deploy a certain kind of new hybrid type of warfare where like they're going to do the thing that has for the last 10 or 15 years looks like everything they do when they're either doing a drill or a hoax, right? Only this time it is going to be real. So it's going to have all of the characteristics of a fake event, but also all of the characteristics of a real event. Therefore, while everybody's arguing about all of this kind of shit, they can be proceeded so far down the road that by the time anybody has figured it out, much less convinced enough people that there's any kind of consensus about what happened, it did the things that they wanted to do as a result of it will already be in place, right? So it's a new layer, right? It's a new layer. It's throwing much all the shapes of the pasta at the wall, and while we try and pick out the spaghetti and the fusilli and the whatever, like they're on to their next stop. So I think it's entirely possible that what Mark says is 100% true and what you say is 100% true. And the mess lies in the sort of back and forth, trying to weave those kinds of two together. What you say is really interesting. I think that the possibility that this is a bioweapon is probably a certainty, right? Like you can find lots of papers about how it seems to affect people of particular blood types more than other blood types. You can find that, a lot of the areas that were hit the hardest were areas that were where there are more black and brown people, right? You can find, of course, that, they're coming with this really weird, strategy that they want to offer the vaccine to the black and brown people first, right? Which if you follow eugenics, then it should tick up the hairs on the back of your necks and whatever. But I don't think there's anything unreasonable about thinking that this is a bioweapon that is targeted at, particular groups of people more so than others. And then this thing about the pigmentation changing is interesting on a number of levels. And the fact that it can have a biological process and then further out a social process whereby it ignites a new level or a new form of racism, right? That with a health basis that we haven't seen in a long time, right? It's like not that different than like, you know, like leper kind of stuff, right? Like that kind of thing. I think it's quite interesting. I like your theory about why this would happen with something changing with the pigmentation. I don't know enough about genetics or DNA to know or understand that, but I think that's an interesting theory. And it also, you know, I know that pigmentation can change based on diet people consume. Like I know people who overconsume carrots, so their skin can turn orange from excess beta carotene. So there certainly could be something in a medication that is, you know, especially if it's not something a person normally consumes, can shift pigmentation. The thing with the hair is different though, so that kind of leans more towards what you're saying. I think the whole thing is interesting and weird, and I had not heard that story. I was aware about like some of the, you know, it is a bioweapon against Black people or people of darker skin tones or whatever, but I had not heard about this story that you're talking about. So interesting.
For a little bit of added research, if people are interested in this point, I would recommend the recent completed drama series called Dr. Robot, which was on the USA Network in America, as well as being available on Amazon Prime.
Is it Dr. Robot or is it iRobot?
Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot. That's right.
Yeah. So Mr. Robot is basically about a computer hacker who wants to use his skills to liberate humanity from the corporate sector. And one of the things that is a running theme throughout the series, the Chinese having an ambition to be granted the entire Congo. And when they spoke with the writer of that, they said, like, why is this theme about China going to the UN and wanting permission to basically colonize a part of Africa? And he said because he was doing a lot of research into what China and their ambitions are for Africa. So it was very, very interesting in terms of that. So that is like a little known thing. For people that, again, because we're in this thing of fake news, is it real, is it not? Some of the sources I have used for that are from the Daily Mail, NBC News, BBC News, CNN, The Guardian. So just so people know that, people might say, oh, you're just going on blogs and you're just saying certain things, but no, I am keeping it mainstream for the Snopes people. I'm sure will be listening to our conversation.
There was one more thing, and because of what you just said about Africa and that part that you had here, that was the clip from the speech from the university professor. Yeah, absolutely. Several years ago in my research came up all this stuff about how China was really smart in the way it was conducting warfare or economic takeover in Africa. Like we tend to go in with, you know, violence and overturning governments and things like that, whereas China goes in with a sort of velvet fist and offers partnerships, right? And offers like to do things for the countries, right? Whether it be, you know, countries that have a lot of things under the ground, like minerals, or in this case, like what you're talking about, that they have very arable land. So they go in and they make it look like we're in business together, we're in partnership. Meanwhile, back in their home country, they're increasing the amount of animus towards African people, right? Through pushing sort of a racist narrative, so that when they then do something that possibly wipes out the people in this new land, the people at home are okay with it, and then they go in and they own that land from these partnerships. I mean, I can see the sort of level of chess that's being played with that, and it's a different tactic. They definitely have a different tactic as to how they conduct invasion, infiltration, warfare, all of that kind of stuff. And what you're talking about is definitely one of their tactics.
Now, for number 2, this is a little treat for your Patreon subscribers. We will be showing rather saucy and adult content that we will not be able to show on YouTube, and it relates to one Hillary Clinton, but don't worry, she's not naked. So via her official Twitter, uploaded on Monday, the 28th of September 2020, Hillary Clinton announced that in partnership with media corporation iHeartMedia, a podcast series of over 24 episodes would begin, in which she would host, inviting selected guests in conversation. Its title of the podcast being You and Me Both with Hillary Clinton. The tweet had a likely staged photo of Hillary Clinton at home, what looks like her either doing a test run for her podcast or whilst presenting a pre-recorded episode, with her laptop being propped up by a number of coffee books, which are, according to Wikipedia, oversized, usually hard-covered books, whose purpose is for display on a table intended for use in an area which one entertains guests and from which it can serve to inspire conversation or pass the time. Subject matter is predominantly non-fiction and pictorial, a photo book. Twitter user at Miss Liberty 89 decided to look at the various books in the tweet and arrived at a surprising discovery that Hillary Clinton has an interest in erotic ceramics. As your viewers will be able to see via the red arrow and circle, the book is Lucio Barbaco Erotics, published by Arnold Scher Art Publishers in 2018, a retrospective of the famed Venice, Italy glass decorator Luciano Barbaco. Maybe I'm butchering it, but you can see his name on it. Now, we can't show you this image, YouTubers, but we will show it to you for all you naughty people on Patreon. Luciano Barbaco grew up surrounded by centuries-old glass culture on the island of Murano in Italy. He has invented a glass technique to sculpt bodies that appear in motion. His figures are precariously placed in poses that make for a lively arrangement. He uses delicate soda lime glass mixture instead of the sturdier Pyrex to achieve a more vibrant, colourful result. What's unique about his work is the overt sexual content with the overtones of BDSM, bondage, discipline, sadomasochism, combined with awareness of the mystic arts, being ancient European, Middle Eastern mythology. An example that we cannot show has a male demon figure giving oral pleasure to a naked adult female figure whom is in the role what we would classify as a dominatrix, with a whip in her right hand and what seems to be a glass of white wine in her left. Another within the book has a chalice that is made up of adult female figures, all BDSM themed. Yet what is a reference or possible coincidence is this chalice seems to refer to the Kabbalah. Its design has the human figures in a similar position to the Sephiroth, which according to Wikipedia is 10 illustrations of God's infinite light as it manifests within creation. As revelations of the Creator's will, the Sephiroth should not be understood as 10 different gods, but 10 different channels through which one God reveals his will. It is my belief that the Kabbalah is an interpretation of chakra points, which first arrived within Hinduism and then later Buddhism. And Emily will be showing some examples on the screen of various things and chakra points, etc.
So here's, yeah, I think that's a good interpretation of it. I think there's definitely, when you look at some of the Tree of Life stuff, some of the cathartic grids and all that kind of stuff, I think that's definitely certainly a very likely interpretation.
So unfortunately for viewers on YouTube, you can't actually see the actual photos I've used, but hopefully once I get the document online, you will be able to see that for yourself. So chakra points are about the physical connecting with the soul essence, with the aim of creating well-being within the individual through exercise meeting meditation. This is the pure notion of yoga. Could it be that this art form in the form of a chalice by Luciano Buarco be inspired by a belief from the ancient Indian subcontinent, along with the notion that in Catholicism, which is Italian, this type of drinking vessel being a chalice, which is according to Wikipedia, has been used since the early church because Jesus commanded to his disciples to, quote, do this in remembrance of me. And Paul's account of the Eucharistic rite, the celebration of the Eucharist, became central to Christianity. Naturally, these drinking vessels are used in an important act of worship. We're highly decorated and treated with respect. So within the book Hillary Clinton has, there is a chalice, but the chalice has overt tones of sexuality, meeting a reference of the Kabbalah. So this shows an inversion of something that might be holy and pure. Could the draconian nation of the Catholic Church for easily over 1,000 years on the lives of people throughout northern Italy have resulted in rebellious actions in secret using extreme sexual expressions such as BDSM to group sex? In his final film, Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick, the acclaimed director, had as its central scene being a gathering inspired by classic Venetian masked balls and carnivals. Yet the scene is also religious of a dark occult manner, as it's an inverted Catholic mass with a Christian hymn being played backwards. The ceremony of the film becomes very, very sexual indeed. A fact that's hardly mentioned within the alternative research community is a very strange title of a Wikipedia leaked email from Hillary Clinton's close advisor, John Podesta. This email, dated Saturday the 4th of October 2014, has a very unique title. Its title being Philema, a Favor. Now, for those of you that don't know what Philema is, it is an occult religious philosophy developed in the early 20th century by the renowned, infamous Aleister Crowley. Now, to use this in a title of an email is a rather obscure thing to do. The more well-known John Podesta email that WikiLeaks obtained, dated Sunday the 28th of June 2015, is titled Dinner, in which famed performance artist Marina Abramovich asks if John Podesta and his brother are willing to come to her home for a spirit cooking meal. Spirit cooking within Abramovich's work, and I'm sorry for people who might be eating at the moment, contains pig's blood and human male semen. Whilst doing research, I found two interesting additional pieces for those of you that wish to go deeper. This is from Tinfoil Hat, dated Friday the 27th of November 2020, with special guest Amy Says WTF, in which she looks at the famed black nobility of northern Italy. And the final point is, when Hillary Clinton lost the election all the way back in 2016, she was then almost summoned to go to Venice to perform in an art live performance, again a link with Abramovich but not connected to her, in which Hillary Clinton for more than 1 hour had to read all the emails she could in that time that were released by WikiLeaks. And many political analysts claim that that leak of emails resulted in her losing the election to one Donald Trump. So could the black nobility of Venice, a place that Hillary Clinton appreciates very unique and erotic artwork, have summoned her in a humiliation ceremony as a form of punishment? It seems Venice is where the naughty action is.
Not surprising. This one is interesting and weird. Like, right, the WikiLeaks dump of the Clinton and Podesta emails in some ways like the gift that keeps on giving, right? In terms of like most people focused in on a few particular ones. And in my opinion, they spent way too much time on certain things that weren't provable when there was things that were easily provable in other emails that they just chose to ignore. But this one is weird and connective in that synchromistic way that I really like because of the way that you are able to trace it back to her in this podcast with this book and whatnot, right? I like sort of tying these loops. The photographs that we can't show here will be available on the Patreon page and probably at a later date somewhere else, but we didn't want to get dinged for showing something erotic on YouTube or whatever. It's just weird. Like, I don't know that I have too much more to say about that one other than it's just like this shit is fucking weird, right? This shit is fucking weird, and I'm 100% sure that nobody else other than you would have come up with that as a top 10 for 2020. But it's one of those things that like goes in the awesome isn't that weird column. If you ever watch a Useful Idiots, they talk about that, right? You have it.
Could you go
weird? Huh?
Could you go back to that photo of Hillary Clinton with the red arrow and the circle, please? I just want to give a little insight that's a bit funny for our listeners.
All right, please do. Let me screen share. Scroll back up to that. Here we go. Go ahead.
If you notice how Hillary Clinton is dressed, it is somebody that is your typical upper middle class to upper grandmother. It's all very tastefully done with a very looking antique tablecloth.
Mm-hmm.
She's got large books such as encyclopedias, atlases, dictionaries, thesauruses, and it's got this wicker basket that is used to put your TV magazine in every week, or your big New York Times in Washington Post, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for all of this very niche grandmother-esque type of setup, the woman is absolutely kinky.
Yeah, and you know, I changed what I said. I am going to say something about this. The fact that she went and in an art gallery read as many emails as she could in an hour, to me, that is like a somehow symbolic of the fact that like nobody ever throughout all of this said those are not my emails.
Exactly.
Right. And so she's there reading them at like, you know, like in an art gallery as a performance, almost to glorify the fact that like, despite all of this stuff that, right, all of this stuff that's in here, like, I mean, it could be both things. It could be a humiliation ritual, like you said, which I'm sure it was on one level. But the other thing is like, all this stuff is here. I've never said these aren't my emails. John Podesta has never said these are not my emails, and we're not going to jail. Ha! I'm going to come over here and just read them out loud to anybody who wants to come listen, right? Like it's both. It's a humiliation ritual for the public, and probably on a certain level, a humiliation ritual for her.
Yeah, so that's it. So it's just very interesting that somebody that has this sort of, and it's also how the Catholic Church has framed sexual expression, and how they have made it feel very guilty within the world, particularly like the Western world, where people feel very awkward about that notion. And for the majority of us, if it weren't for two people getting freaky, hopefully on a consensual manner, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So it is part of like how we are, how we express, but there's a shame to it. So the Catholic Church, through its draconian harsh measures, has created a polar opposite, which is this like really kinky, dark, occultic, depraved type of expression. But it was just genius that somebody on Twitter just had the sense to say, right, I'm just going to get each book and see what they are.
Totally.
And Miss Liberty, she was the one that got it. So credit to her. So now on to number 3.
Number 3, here we come.
Unusual weather systems have been a thing within 2020. For the first time I can remember, the UK didn't experience a spring, rather fast forwarded directly into summertime weather from Wednesday the 1st of April till Wednesday the 23rd of September 2020. Normally the UK has its summer from mid-June to late September. The first time I realised something was happening was on the evening of Sunday, the 19th of January 2020, when a truly spectacular sunset that had an unreal quality that I had never observed before. So if you can show that photo from Sunday, the 19th of January 2020 from North Wales.
There we go.
So for those of you that are listening to this on a podcast, we are seeing it from Berg Neglis, which is a village in Denbighshire in North Wales. And the sunset is in some ways very, very aggressive in colour, but also very subtle. And then it looks like it's almost computerized or digitized in its look. So I remember this day or this dusk period, and I was just looking out of my window, utterly perplexed. Like, I'm 43 years of age, and I'd never seen a sunset to that level. But later on that year, something else came along that was rather more spectacular.
Real quickly, before you go away from this, you know, there's a couple of ways to look at this, right? So first of all, we've been experiencing sunsets like that here right now. In the last several weeks, we've been seeing a lot of this, right? Maybe not quite as intense as that one, but with definitely, you know, in the same ballpark. But what's interesting is if you look, remember, like, particularly like in the 80s and 90s, they would sell these prints that people could put on their walls in the house of like the ocean, but they would put it in, like, they'd change the filter on it so that it would look like colors other than the ocean water. Like, this almost looks like a tide coming in.
Yes, it's very
right?
perplexing. It's very unusual. It's like, it looks like lava, but then it doesn't have the aggression of lava at the same time. I'm sorry for those of you listening on the podcast saying, describe it more, but I could say it has touches of very soft pink and then very aggressive fire type orange combined within it.
And but like, if you really look at it, like, this could look like you're looking at, like, you know, if you're in the mountains and you're looking down and there's the ocean, it's kind of a, you know, low tide, not very aggressive waves at that point and whatnot, and the sun hitting the water. So I think like this is like one of these very psychedelic things that we're seeing right now, as what is happening in the skies is very reflective of what's happening on the ground and below the ground, right? So it's a pretty intense picture. Yeah.
So these occurrences that are currently happening in Los Angeles, are they highly unusual? That's why you've mentioned them. And what colors are you seeing?
So we're like a lot of, so for there's been a lot of colorful sunsets as long as they've been doing heavy chemtrailing in Los Angeles, like particularly off of the coast, right? So if they do chemtrailing at a particular time of day and you have a certain kind of sunset or whatever, you'll get this at sundown sometimes. But what's been interesting is the various times of day it's been occurring at here. And it's been more, it's like pink and purple and blue. It doesn't have quite as much orange often as this one does. Although sometimes it does if the sun is setting just right. But I'll say there is one place that I've observed this more naturally, and that's in Africa, in the desert. Like, you know, there, I think Toto even has a song, I Felt the Rains Down in Africa, and it talks about the sunsets in the sky. There are these just brilliant purple sunsets, like purple, orange, pink, these colors, but there isn't the cloud cover, like, right? So this is sort of, to me, what we're looking at here is a falsely created cloud cover that then is taking on the colors that formerly maybe were only ever achieved in the sky over Africa. I don't know, maybe there was some other, you know, chemtrailing program we didn't know about, you know, whatever, you know, but Africa is famous for these sunsets. And I mean, I suppose it's possible they were always chemtrailing Africa and they came to the Western world later. And so now we're just experiencing something and going, oh, isn't this beautiful? When really it's like the chemicals being, I don't know, like, I don't know. But we have been having this in the past few weeks here, this just intensely pink, purple, bluish color in the sky. That just is, I mean, you go to take a picture of it and just kind of like, I'm not going to steal your thunder, but you can't, this one is pretty good. It's generally really tough to do any justice to the actual colors in the sky with the camera, no matter kind of what you do to your filter.
Yeah, so one of the things within the alternative research community is that we like to look at very complex, deeper, hidden oceans, but sometimes the mystery can be right in front of us.
Yep.
And an example being, because I must have been about 8, 9 years old, and I was in the school playground, and I noticed for the first time, obviously it must have happened before, but I noticed for the first time that I could see in the mid-afternoon the sun and the moon at the same time. And I was always told previous to that, the sun is in the day, the moon is in the night. So I was totally perplexed by this, and I was going to school monitors who were dinner lady canteen staff who would monitor us at playtime. They must probably getting a bit of money cash in hand, whilst the teachers who should have been doing that job were relaxing in the teacher's room. And I would be asking them, how can I see the moon there? And how can I see the sun there at exactly the same time? And it's daylight. And they were like, we don't know. And it was just one of them things. And that's the wonder of life. Sometimes it is interesting to get into the hidden, ignored context, but other times just look at outside your front door and say, why is this happening here? Why does this happen at this time? Why are people behaving in this way? What is happening with the tension? And, you know, it can lead to things. So the next photo is of the same day, Sunday, the 19th of January, this taken at the West Kirby Promenade on the West Wirral Peninsula, and it faces North Wales. So yet again, you have the spectacular purples going into whites, into silvers, into classical sunset yellow, and it's a mixture of all of these colours. And again, I just remember that evening looking at the sky for at least an hour, saying, what is going on? This has never happened before in my 43 years of which I've lived in this area of the UK for the majority of my life. So to use a metaphor, it appeared as if the sky was created by Vincent van Gogh, and it was so stunning, it even got the attention of local media within North Wales, this being the Daily Post, on Sunday, the 19th of January 2020, with the title of Stunning Pink Sunset over North Wales Set Social Media Alight. So I wasn't the only one that was perplexed by this rather spectacular occurrence in nature. So once lockdown arrived in the UK on Monday, the 23rd of March 2020, the weird weather increased, I have never seen that many rainbows in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It was becoming like a daily occurrence where I once saw a triple interlocking rainbow, and I have not seen that before or since. And the peak of its activity arrived in June 2020, starting on Monday, the 15th of June in Liverpool, that produced a sunset I can only describe as in a metaphor being in 4K ultra high definition resolution, metallic bright orange that slowly incorporated elements of pink. I clearly remember going outside my home to look at the sky and had numerous moments with passers-by whom were also perplexed by this memorable display. So for those of you watching, this is a photo from an area that maybe is about 4 miles from my location, known as the Georgian Quarter. And the photo is looking at the famed Anglican Cathedral of Liverpool. And as Emily says, the filters, you would have to have a top level professional SLR type camera to get the full vividness of what occurred on Monday, the 15th of June. As I said, it forced me to leave my home and engage in conversations with passers-by as to what this was, because I needed confirmation from other people that what I was seeing was real and it wasn't some sort of hallucination. I didn't think it was, but I could have banged my head without knowing it. You have concussion, that can change your distortion of reality. And then other people were then asking me, without being prompted, if I was seeing what they were seeing.
Yeah.
And it was total confusion. And the next image is the most spectacular. And that is from Liverpool city centre. And it looks towards the Art Deco, Babylonian inspired George Docks building. And it's so orange, it looks like it's photoshopped. It is so maxed up to the level of brightness in terms of the orange spectrum. You would think that was some sort of like cool Photoshop,
Yeah.
but the sky was a bit more orange than what's on that photo.
Yeah.
So it was causing all types of confusion on social media within my local area and within the Northwest and North Wales as to why it happened. And there are a few more examples, but again, it was taken by people with cell phones, and the people with the cell phones couldn't get it to be the vivid notion of it. So if you just press view there, Emily, I think if you just press view.
Nope, it's not letting me in.
I should let you in. If you go back and you go to view.
Ah, there we go. Okay.
So this is an example in the east of the city.
Why would this be considered sensitive viewing?
Because maybe people have, maybe this person likes to put controversial things on their Twitter account. And due to the recent change in Twitter, which we won't talk about because of you know who,
yeah.
And as we're talking about this on the 10th of January 2021, maybe this is the new Twitter regulations coming into action and process.
I'm going to say something here that might be me talking out my ass, but that wouldn't be the first time. So see how in this picture here, you see this like thing here, this like strip of like a more shimmery yellow gold, right?
Like a coil.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, obviously, like we might go, oh, okay, this is, you know, we have the plasma or the chemtrails and it makes this look, yes, we know that. Okay. But in some research I've been doing to another topic I don't want to get into today because it's just super deep. We've been looking at something on the Thunderbolts project the YouTube channel by a guy named Andrew Hall, which talks about like dragons or plasma scars on the earth, like scars on the earth that are evidence that there had been a plasma discharge there, right? And he calls them dragons. And they're in the ground, like you see these in the ground, like along certain areas, right? This looks like it reflected in the sky. And this other thing that I've been looking into that's more complex talks about when we get to a particular point, we'll start to see evidence of what is going on in the sky, reflected in what is going on underground, reflected in the sky. And I believe that that's even a passage that's in some sort of biblical or religious texts that like at some point, everything will become apparent to us in the sky. So
well, Aleister Crowley is known for his promotion of the saying, as below, so above.
Right. So like it's the idea that there's something going on underground. Let's say we're and this could be like having to do with some earth changes. It could also be part of what's causing people to have experienced certain effects that maybe are also being clustered under the title of the said virus and whatever, right? Like lots of things are happening, but I'm wondering if this is literally evidence in the sky above of a plasma discharge event happening underground, right? And so I recommend people go check out, I haven't even finished watching the series yet, but it's just taking me the Andrew Hall videos on Thunderbolts about dragons and plasma discharge events. And that's exactly, that looks like, doesn't that look like what that was? It looks like it, doesn't it? So he's talking about it in the ground, but as above, so below, right? So anyway, I just had to point that out. So sorry about that.
Yeah, that's great. And then there's two other photos that viewers can see.
Oh, wow.
This is like very, very near, and it was changing color as time progressed. So what we are watching, for people who are listening on the podcast, we are looking at a candy pink, but totally very bright pink, very unnatural in color, but very bright. And then in the middle of the photo, above the famous Liver buildings, seems to be a white silver cloud in the middle of that.
You know what this reminds me of? Like, I don't know anything. Again, I'm going to talk out my ass. But when on the few occasions I've ever seen any kind of like anime, or the other thing I think is called like manga, I don't know what it's called. But a lot of times in that anime, like the skies or the backgrounds look this color, or like a color that is absurd for what's supposed to be a sky, right?
Exactly.
Looks like something. I mean, it is incredibly surreal. It's like Hello Kitty took over the weather control program or something like that.
Yeah, that's why people, like, I saw people, even, I walked on a main road in Liverpool, a major road, and I just wanted to like look at the sky and then interact with people. And there were people just like parking their cars, and they were just coming out of the cars, just looking at the sky. And then they were on the other side of the road, and they were looking at me, and I was looking at them to say, what is going on right now? So the last photo is iconic Liverpool. And this is facing the famed Liverpool Football Club, my beloved soccer team. Other soccer teams in Liverpool are available, but we will not talk about them.
Wow.
So this is somebody in the Anfield area looking towards the stadium. And again, it has this golden pink going into purple experience.
Like it literally looks like when you see like some cartoon thing of like some unicorn ice cream cone or something, like that's the color, right? It's like, looks like rainbow sherbet or something like that. You know, it does. I mean, like, so what I'm thinking of is we started seeing a lot of this here when the fires were here at the late summer, early fall. And when there are fires, right, like you get weird colors in the sky like that. But I'm assuming there were no fires going on when you were experiencing that, right? And
none whatsoever.
And we're experiencing it now, and there are no fires now. It's very unusual. And I just keep thinking, what is going on underground? Like, one of the things that keeps popping into my head, right? And this is like, I hate to even say this, but one of the things we've been hearing about a lot over the course of the last year is like, oh, they're blowing up or burning out the underground bases and saving the children and all that kind of stuff, right? And like, like, you know, maybe they are, maybe they're not. Maybe that's a story to cover up other fiery kinds of events that are going on underneath the ground, the more natural. When I say natural, just more earth process, for an earth process reason, or maybe even for a spiritual reason, and that we're literally seeing the reflection of it in the sky. Like, I don't know if the children, you know, I don't have anything to say really about the story about the bases or whether that's true or not for this issue. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, right? But like, why? This is something that I would normally associate with fire. So if we live in a reflective world, is there something fiery going on under the ground, whether it be spiritual in nature or a physical geological process?
Yeah, I've got like no theory on it. It's just that if you look at the other photos from that example, it's just beautiful and perplexing. And then later on, 100 miles south of Liverpool, was very strange things occurring in the Midlands area, in which there were red orb type rainbows that were then interacting with lightning.
Yep.
All at the same time, all around late afternoon, early evening. And again, people were perplexed. And earlier on the 15th of June, which was the same day as the Liverpool spectacular sunset show, the BBC released an article at 11:39 a.m. titled "Incredible Lightning Rainbows Illuminate UK Skies." So what must have happened was that many people must have been noticing this bizarre type of weather pattern. They were then contacting the Met Office and the BBC, and then the BBC then done an article on it. But then later on that evening, that was when I noticed what was happening in Liverpool on the same day.
Yep.
So what Emily is showing now for people listening on the podcast is that BBC article from the morning of Monday, the 15th of June, 2020, titled "Incredible Lightning Rainbows Illuminate UK Skies." So it is a series of photos from people in the Midlands area of England showing how lightning is interacting with rainbows, some of which are double rainbows as well, in an orb type formation.
All right, so this is where I will refer people to go check out the FPV YouTube Angel YouTube channel, as well as the Thunderbolts Project YouTube channel, because I think that there's probably a very good explanation for this. But if your mind is open, you'll probably be able to understand what it might be. But these are phenomenal pictures, Darren. I didn't see any of these when at that time. They didn't make it across my screen somehow. These are incredible.
So yeah, so for all these people that would like to see this, what I will do after this conversation is try to make these notes available as a PDF for free.
This is what I'll do here, and I can do it real easily. What I'll do is I'll make these available publicly on my Patreon page, because I can upload a PDF attachment there. So I can make it so anybody who's listening can go to patreon.com/offplanetmedia, and there will be a publicly available post that contains the notes. How's that?
Thank you, Emily. You are a goddess. So the other thing for people that might not be aware is one of the most leading researchers in alternative research, known as Christopher Knowles of the famed Secrets Sun blog. He even noticed, and he lives in the East Coast of America, that there were things going on with weather. So from a blog titled Strange Skies, dated Monday the 13th of April 2020, Christopher details what he has noticed in his vicinity around the strangeness and the unusual nature of weather in 2020.
Yeah, his photos, and he took these on a camera phone, and so he says this doesn't actually reflect what he was seeing, but he did write an entire blog post about it, and I guess he's written a book. I didn't know that. He's written a book about the skies And so he's been looking at these phenomena for a long time. Okay, there we can see a little bit of one of these things. This, what you see in his pictures here are what we've been seeing. So he was seeing them this time last spring. This is what we've been seeing this past 3 weeks here. Something that looks pretty much like this. I started noticing this weather pattern, this cloud pattern in the sky, like a few years ago here in Los Angeles, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
So what Emily is describing for people that are listening on the podcast are strange cloud formations at night that are almost grid-like in pattern.
Yeah.
And have a resemblance familiar shape. So each cloud has an almost identical to similar shape happening in a grid pattern at night.
Yeah, and so I guess Chris has written a book called He Will Live Up in the Sky. And I wasn't aware, I know he's a brilliant synchromistic and syncretizer on a lot of topics, and I knew he'd written books, but I didn't know he'd written one about the sky. So he has some thoughts about what some of these things portend, and he's written about it. So people can go over there and check that out. Much respect to Chris Knowles. I'd love to have him on the show sometime.
Well, I regularly converse with him on Twitter. So hopefully after seeing this, I will be able to facilitate a conversation between the two of you.
Yeah, I've always been very interested in his work. I just found out about some other interesting things that he's looked into that I wasn't aware of recently. So yeah, I've always, some of his episodes on higher side chats and whatnot have been some of my favorite of all time. So yeah, very good. Okay.
Number 4 is something that when you watch it, you know it's special. You can't understand why it's special, and it means that you have to watch it again to fully understand its meaning. And this being the sci-fi 2020 worldwide smash hit Raised by Wolves, which premiered on HBO Max, and its first 2 episodes were directed by none other than the famed director Sir Ridley Scott of Aliens franchise fame and Gladiator. Now, it is in my opinion that Scott is using this sci-fi series as a warning to the future of humanity due to a possible current unseen battle between 2 distinct groups, these being '21st century tech billionaire atheists of Santa Clara, USA, versus contemporary practitioners of the ancient mystic religion known as Mithraism. What was very personal for me watching this series was how it connected with the extensive research of my deceased friend, the acclaimed pop culture, geopolitical expert, historian, and occult author Tracy Twyman, whom has also been interviewed by Emily in the past, and that interview should be available on Emily's archive. Tracy's last book, Genuflect, whilst fiction, was directly inspired by her extensive research about Mithraism in 21st century London. Tracy died in July 2019, and it would have been very interesting for me to see her reaction to something very, very hidden to the ordinary Joes and ordinary Janes, being one of the most pop culture events of the year by the involvement of one of the greatest film directors of all time, who just so happens to be a British citizen. Without giving spoilers, the series is set in the mid-22nd century, in which it has been found via artificial intelligence that the ancient teachings of Mithraism have encoded within them various advanced quantum physics beyond the understanding of the scientific knowledge of the time. This discovery then creates a worldwide cult whom used this new discovery in technology to establish the religion of Mithraism once again. That began an international holy war against all ideologies different to them. The Mithraic leadership in Raised by Wolves were very successful in eliminating the established religions we know today, and can be seen by an oil painting in a very early episode of the series that shows Christianity to be completely eradicated by them. A cause of this ideology being the natural percentage of humanity viewing belief in religion as destructive. Therefore, they refused to convert to this new religion in the series, leading to an international conflict between the Mithraic, powered by their new technology based in their ancient religion, versus atheists. The vibe of this conflict is the American army versus the Viet Cong of the infamous Vietnam War. If a psychologist of an academic high level specializing in sexual dynamics, particularly sexual fetishization, watched the series Raised by Wolves, I would be fascinated to hear or read their analysis, as what I interpreted within the show had nods to, yet again, BDSM, bukkake, sex within a digital realm, sex dolls, oral pleasure, and interracial relationships known in America as jungle fever. The definition of this jungle fever being a sexual obsession between black and white racial groups based on media-based stereotype myths regarding the sexual allure of the other race. The writer of Raised by Wolves and showrunner, one Aaron Gukowski, was Jesuit educated, and prior to wanting to work in Hollywood, earlier in his life, he had seriously considered becoming a priest. According to Guzikowski, he is no longer a practicing Catholic, rather a belief that there is a supreme intelligence, yet that will not be confined by an established religion. The final episode of season 1 of Raised by Wolves is on par with the surrealism within the work of Twin Peaks by David Lynch. Finally, I suspect the title is referring to the myth regarding the origin of the founding of the city of Rome. Twin brothers Romulus and Remus are deliberately abandoned as infants and are saved by a female wolf who has just given birth, yet allows the twins to suckle on them until they are rescued by a shepherd.
All right, so this is interesting. So I was glad this showed up on your list. I was, so my exposure to this was basically earlier this year in the summer. I was walking down Sunset Boulevard and I noticed this very unusual billboard, right, for this show, and I was like, wow, that looks like there's going to be a lot of revelation there. I didn't know anything about it. I know that Tracy was really into this Mithra stuff and did a lot of research and talked about it for a long time, but I didn't really know exactly what it was. So I didn't know that from looking at the billboard, but I was like, oh, I'll have to watch that sometime. And then I forgot about it, right? And then a few weeks ago, so wolf stuff, wolf programming, and this whole kind of like idea of like the connection between wolf genetics and human genetics and things like this has been coming up over and over and over, both in the work I've been doing with Michael Wan and some other things for the last few months. But a few weeks back, I was in the salon and before they shut them down again, and there was a magazine, and I've showed this picture, I think, on a show before. I don't know where it is right now, otherwise I'd pull it up. There is a company that makes high-end like stoves and refrigerators and things like that called Wolf. Literally, the ad on the back of the magazine had a DNA strand, right? Where, when the DNA strand, you have your two strands, and then you have like the ladder across there. There were floating pieces of technology on that strand that connects them, right? And it's about like wolf, it's in your DNA. right? So like that, there was that ad. So I was glad you put this there, and we went to go watch it last night. Laura found it too disturbing. She had to leave the room. We just watched the first episode because the first episode is available for free on YouTube. I have HBO, but for some reason I guess I don't have HBO Max. They like doesn't cost anything, but you have to call your cable company to get it. Maybe I will. There was things that I immediately did not like about this, but also that thing where you're like, okay, there is something here. There's something here that they've done with the symbolism, with the way that they've shown technology, the way that they have shown sort of like dystopic or, you know, kind of living, the way that they have shown androids, the way that they have shown, you know, spirituality still intact in a child. There's something here. So I may investigate watching some of these episodes further, especially now that I know that it connects to some of the work that Tracy had done. But the symbology is just all over the place, even in the first episode. It's interesting, and I don't necessarily think it's too far off from some of the stuff that's really going on. And so, you know, I may continue to watch it. I was glad you brought this into the fray here. It's definitely weird.
Yeah, one of the things that interests me about Ridley Scott's work is the death of his brother, Tony Scott, related to the film Prometheus.
Mm-hmm.
And he drove to a part of Los Angeles that is very industrialized via maritime docks,
Yep.
etc. And he jumped off a bridge in the middle of the day. And then the media stated that Tony Scott committed suicide due to being told he had inevitable brain cancer.
Okay.
So his wife then challenged the notion of this, presented medical papers, and then had his own physician to say that Tony Scott never had brain cancer. So the Catholic Church, a few weeks after his death, in their official newspaper, condemned Prometheus for promoting ideas that would, in their opinion, destabilize the Catholic youth. Because Catholic youth were watching Prometheus, which pertains to the ancient aliens theory of them creating life on this planet, including us. And the Catholic Church did not like it.
Yeah.
So it is my belief that Ridley Scott is in some way a deep insider into how we think as a species. It could be possible that think tanks, very powerful bloodline families, corporations, governments ask for his opinion, how the ordinary Joes and ordinary Janes can process information or revelations of the method. And then he will give his insight as a director on how to present that message. So I think Sir Ridley Scott is a big insider into how things are and how things operate. And I'm sure you have had discussions with people who are very passionate atheists. I have. And their passion is almost fundamental religion.
It's only matched by fundamental Christians.
Where science is fact, science cannot be disputed, the supernatural does not exist. It is a confusion and a curse on humanity. So they talk in very, very fundamental terms. And the way he is dressed, the Mithraic in Raised by Wolves, reminds me of a contemporary take on the Knights Templar.
Yep.
So I think he's trying to say that the Knights Templar were actually, to their core, Mithraic in their religion.
Yep.
And they weren't actually Catholic or loyal to the Pope at the time. So there's a lot of things within it. And there's still that Ridley Scott obsession with alien beings being, spoiler alert, being within women. So you see that with Ripley in the Aliens franchise, and you see this within Mother, who is the cyborg in Raised by Wolves. So there's things going on, and it has the most over-the-top, spectacular sex scene I've ever seen. I'm just like...
All right. Okay. That wasn't in the episode that I saw. So no, I think all your points are good. To the area of Los Angeles that Tony Scott supposedly died in is San Pedro, which is a very bizarre area. It's kind of this area sort of that's between like Los Angeles and Long Beach, right? And it is there on the docks. It's a very industrial area. It's also an area that is like it's part of that controversial area that the Chinese has sort of taken over, and that we always hear in reference to some of the stories about Adam Schiff or Dan Crenshaw or, whatever, like some of those kinds of things, right? So that is interesting that that's where he died. A few other things that I've been talking about on the show over the last several months have pointed to that area as an interesting area as well. Yeah, it's an interesting show. I may continue with it, but yes, I do think that what you're talking about with the Mithraeus, and that this is a religion that these people believe in. That we're told they're in secret societies that are this, that, or the other thing, but there is some deep thing that they very much believe, right?
Well, if people want to know more, Michael Bloomberg, who was an American presidential candidate, has his European headquarters in London, and that is on the site of a Roman Mithraic temple that he has actually incorporated as part of his building.
And this is plays a large role in Tracy's final book, Genuflect, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not saying Mr. Bloomberg is Mithraic, because I don't have enough money for to take him on in a legal high court statement. But all I will say is it is fact that the site of the Bloomberg European headquarters in London is on the site of a Mithraic temple. What? So if you wish to watch Raised by Wolves and you're in the United Kingdom, it is available on Sky Atlantic, all episodes. And for those in America, it is available on HBO Max.
Excellent. Okay, let's see. Where are we at here? Let me just get back to what I was doing.
We're at number 5 now.
Okay, so that was, okay, so we'll do number 5, and then it'll be time for a break, and we'll move over to the patron section. All right, so let's get to number 5. Number 5 is, Darren?
Silly Submarine. Now, one of the interesting things we look at as an alternative research community, again, are hidden things that are sort of revealed to us in the mainstream media. We look at secret societies of an ancient dark occultic origin. We look at people with very disturbing sexual predilections. We look at individuals that have instincts of a futuristic scientific basis, like Nikola Tesla, that are way beyond anything of their era and time. So we like to go with the fabulous. We like to go with the fantastic, because that keeps us stimulated and it gives us something to talk about. But one of the most frightening things of this world are people with power and people who are in particular occupations, that if they act in an idiotic manner, it could be catastrophic for millions of people. Just a mistake, just wanting to break up the monotony of their life in their working world.
Oh, Darren, you went on mute. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I had to just cough a bit.
Sorry.
So basically, these individuals might be bored in work, might be just wanting to do something, and they're in a precise, important, critical element that you can't do that. You have to be robotic in your actions.
Yeah.
So on Thursday, the 16th of July, 2020, the Marine Accident Investigation Branch known as the MAIB of the United Kingdom, released a report regarding an incident which happened on Tuesday, the 6th of November 2018 in the North Channel, the strait between northeastern Northern Ireland and southwestern Scotland that connects the Irish Sea with the Atlantic Ocean. So the report found that at 12:56 p.m. on the 6th of November 2018, during daytime in good visibility, and these are important points to remember, a nuclear-powered British Navy submarine nearly collided with the MS Stena Superfast 7, owned by Stella Line, being a major international ferry operator that connects services throughout Europe. The ferry being a fast roll-on, roll-off ship designed to carry motor vehicles within its hull with rooms for passengers, during the reported incident had 215 passengers on board with a crew of 67. Therefore, the ship had 282 people on board. The report found, dated the Thursday, the 16th of July 2020, for unknown reasons, the captain of the submarine decided to order his vessel to go towards the passenger ship as a live training exercise, all happening whilst the submarine was at periscope depth. This being when a submerged submarine is at a shallow depth where periscopes and masts can be used, and the risk of a collision is imminent. What prevented the disaster was every ship has a member of crew whom is a lookout. Thankfully, this individual was fully engaged in their role rather than seeking stimulation from their mobile cell phone device, as is often the case when you go to a supermarket checkout and that member of staff is looking on their Facebook or WhatsApp rather than serving you. Stella Superfast 7 lookout spotted the submarine periscope close to the port bow and instantly alerted the command deck of the ship, who took immediate action to avoid the reported collision. After avoiding the action, the ferry's closest point of approach to the submarine was 229 metres, this being legally unsafe under British maritime and naval law. However, the submarine navy commander believed the distance between the two vessels within the report was about 914 metres. Therefore, the commanding officer of the British Navy submarine was wrong of a distance of 685 metres or 749 yards. Now, what is scary about this report, Emily, is that it doesn't actually confirm if the vessel had nuclear weapons on it. Mm-hmm. So what could have happened was, as you've mentioned before, we have this thing about live exercises suddenly becoming real. Or we've got something where this commander of a sub wants to see in a macho way how skilled his crew are and how willing they are to follow his orders, even if it contravenes their training and also the data within their sonar radar. Mm-hmm. So it was just something that was on the BBC website, and it was one of the topics of the day. And I just read through the actual designated Navy report, and I was just flabbergasted just via the nonchalance of the Navy commander when speaking to the people doing the report. There was no explanation why he almost gave an order to collide with a ferry in the middle of the day near 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and there was nothing about him being reprimanded. It might not have even been a he. Women can now obviously be commanders of naval vessels. So whoever was in charge of that naval vessel, we hear nothing about. But it is just scary that we deal with all these serious but very mysterious grand conspiracies. But then we have somebody who can just be an idiot and cause a Chernobyl type disaster.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's basically, it's like driving when you're talking when you're looking at your phone, right? Kind of thing. And we think of that like, okay, like it's something we shouldn't do. It's very dangerous, right? But this is like a much huger scale of like the same kind of thing. Or like you see somebody walking across the street and they're looking at their phone, so they walk right into somebody else or right into the car. This is a much bigger situation with much bigger ramifications. My question is like, do you think this story is actually real? And I mean that in two ways, right? Like there's a lot of numbers thrown around in the story, which like if you take that from, I'm not saying he would say this about this article, but like some of the gematria guys like Zach Hubbard would be like, look at the numbers of this story. These numbers are communicating something else. This is code or communication or whatever. So sometimes you can plant a story in plain sight that the people think is about one thing and it's a ridiculous story, but the point of the story is actually the numbers that are being conveyed in it. Or is it another thing, this is another form of propaganda, right? Where you convince the people that the government is incompetent to keep them from thinking that the government is evil.
That's interesting. Like one of the things to back your points up is the fictional character James Bond is a naval intelligence officer. So a lot of people believe that fictional character is linked to the army, because he's obviously always on land and he's always doing things, right? But he's actually a naval intelligence officer. So one of the things that I know about reading about James Bond, Ian Fleming, that the best spies are naval spies. So that could link all them numbers that you've just said, right? Could link with a released paper, and then people who know certain numbers could relate to it. Now, this links to somebody I wasn't going to talk about.
They could also be coordinates, right? For go look for something somewhere. Yep.
I wasn't going to talk about this person, but it has a Los Angeles connection where you're from. So when Ghislaine Maxwell was apparently on the run, or people were after her, she was sitting outside the In-N-Out Burger, which is a chain of famed burger joints that are throughout California. And within the actual code, the digital code of the photos that were released by her lawyer, some people believe was some sort of coordinates or some sort of message for individuals trained within espionage. So that links to your theory about this report could actually be something in plain sight that I didn't even think about really. And then it was given a high prominence by the BBC on that day as well.
Yeah. No, I think that we oftentimes, and this is very clever, what to use this tactic, right? We think when we read articles or books or watch movies or television shows or hear news reports, we think that they're talking about a particular thing, right? When somebody says something like the one I use this example over and over because it's an easy one to understand. So I'm going to say it to you, even though I'm sure people are tired of hearing it. When somebody says, when you are reading a paper from NASA, right? You hear the word Venus, you think they're talking about the planet, right? Well, there's also a satellite called Venus. There's Venus Williams. There's a song from Bananarama called Venus, right? There's a razor. Isn't there a razor blade called Venus? There's a razor blade that women shave their legs with called Venus. So we don't actually know what they're talking about. And that's a wonderful way to be able to covertly communicate information to people who are in a certain kind of know, right? Without, and even to say we made information public, without really, you're not lying to the people. You're sitting there talking about it openly in front of them, and people think you're talking about one iteration of that word or that picture or that coordinate or whatever, right? And you actually are talking about something totally else. So everything has been revealed. We didn't keep anything a secret from you, right? Like what, all that kind of stuff. And I think this could be an example of that, because I'm looking at that story and I'm going, okay, I'm sure this shit does happen. I'm sure that like people who are like, you know, driving the nuclear submarine are rubbing one out, just like somebody who's, you know, working, you know, a video gamer or whatever the fuck they're doing, and they're not paying attention. I'm sure that happens. But when there is this attempt to, but there's not usually a story about that, right? But the fact that it's just kind of there and no big deal is made about it either way, it's kind of like, okay, here it is. We told you, now we're going to pull it back. If you read the front page of Drudge, right? Like sometimes you'll have these stories that you're like, what? Why is this a front page story? And this is ridiculous. But I think it's there because they're hiding code words or coordinates, or like you're looking for, you know, like this is a funny story. Like you know, maybe I can go through sometime and go through the news and go, okay, I think this is one where they're talking about something else. What they're talking about, I don't know, but it's not what they think they're implying that they're talking about.
Well, one of the stories, this is why I love talking with you, because you have this connection, we have this connection, is that one of the stories I was going to put in the top 10 was this ridiculous story from the BBC in the summer of 2020 around how European astrophysicists demanded vast amounts of funding to see if there was life animal forms in Venus.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the explanations within this BBC article was an astrophysicist with an acoustic guitar singing a song about the importance of this discovery. Right? So I remember I was walking through a rather nice park in Liverpool. Liverpool has some rather beautiful parks. And we were still in lockdown because lockdown was eased on the 4th of July, 2020, quite a significant day. And we were still in lockdown proper. And I just remember being on my phone saying, why is the BBC got as their main headline of the day, animal life forms could be discovered on the planet Venus? And European astrophysicists demand substantial funding for this discovery. And then I remember just playing the astrophysicist with his acoustic guitar, singing the song.
Right. So that,
like, what the hell is this?
So this would go like this. This is just where I would go with that immediately. Is that since space is actually in the ground, that they've discovered a new layer. I think that like things that we think of as lost civilizations or ancient civilizations that disappeared off the earth, they just went underground. Maybe they were compressed into the earth, and some of them may still be alive and functioning, and others not, and whatnot. So whenever they're talking about exploring space, in my head, they're talking about exploring things under the ground, inner Earth, right? And that maybe they had discovered a new layer there, and they want to go see if there's any animals that are still alive in there. And so, like, you know, the singing of the song, I'm not sure I understand what that would be, other than you can, you know, there's a biblical passage about like speaking or singing things into existence. And there's also like a psychedelic aspect to it, as there is with all of this underground stuff, where I think Terence McKenna talks about the self-transforming machine elves were singing things into existence. Like they would speak a word, right? And the thing would come out of their mouth. Not right kind of thing. Like, you know, so there's psychedelic aspects to it. There's like religious and text kind of things that harken to this, but that would be my thing, is that whenever they're asking for funds to go explore deep outer space, they're actually looking for funds to go explore under the ground, right? But if you have people looking in one direction for things, they're not, you know, like then they teach us to look up and out instead of down and in.
Yeah, so it's sort of, again, it's that invasion thing that they're interested in, like what we talked about Hillary Clinton's book and the artwork within that, where they're inverting mystic Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism into a dark occultic meaning. and
Yep.
they're making that into like artwork and books.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a constant inversion that becomes the opposite and then inverted again. So it's all this thing about yin and yang and things opposite and below.
Up and down, in and out, old and new. You could go on and on with this kind of stuff, right? But I fully believe that a lot of things that we think of as having been wiped off the earth were just pushed down into the earth.
That's great. So I tell you what, this is that is the 5th example. We're on number 6. So I don't know if you want to take a break.
We're going to take a break here. And so for those of us who are following on my YouTube channel, go ahead to patreon.com/offplanetmedia for the rest of the show. And for people who are listening on Mark Devlin's Good Vibrations podcast, this will become available to you in some way at some time. We haven't sorted out all the details of that yet, but everything will be available for the people who would like to see and hear it. So, Darren, before we leave, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to give you my details. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
Before we leave the public segment, tell people where they can find you, Darren.
They can find me on Twitter, but who's to say I might not be there in the next couple of days due to all the things I have said in the past of a controversial nature. So as of the 10th of January 2021, I am still on Twitter as Das Alt Theory. That is theory as in science, not as in Tinkerbell, because my accent seems to confuse North Americans. So that's why I give that example. The notes, the significant...
Das Alt Theory. There we go.
There you go. The extensive notes will be kindly put on by Emily on her Patreon site.
Yep.
As a means for people to read. They are 29 pages in total for you to enjoy. I would like to take this time to thank Mark Devlin yet again for this opportunity, as I believe that it's very cathartic for me because I get a lot of ideas and I see a lot of things and I want to get out there and get it out to the world, but I haven't got the confidence to start my own podcast or my own blog because not everybody has to. Some people can work in collaboration, some people are leaders. That's just how it is. And I'm comfortable with the way I feel about this, engaging with people on a more popular medium. So that is Mark Devlin's Good Vibrations podcast on Spreaker. Yep. Emily Moyer is available on YouTube, her extensive, amazing catalogue. One of the best YouTubers going. She has a personal friend of hers. Is it called Dana or Dana?
I'm not sure who you're talking about.
Your friend in Los Angeles.
Oh, she's here. She's taking notes. She takes all the wonderful notes for all the...
No, the other friend that you tend to have these wonderful arguments with, who you said you're very close to.
Who do I have these arguments with?
Yeah, your friend who you have regular conversations with.
Danny Katz, you like
Danny, yeah, sorry. So, so Emily has these wonderful, unscripted, very fiery, sometimes debates with her friend Danny, where they don't necessarily agree on certain things. But I find these to be the most interesting conversations currently within the alternative research community because of the friendship, but also the friction that they have with each other. And again, it's two women in conversation around alternative research, which is a rather rare thing within our community and something that we have to improve from now on. So if you want to experience Emily, she is on YouTube, I am on Twitter, and thank you, Mark Devlin, on your Good Vibrations podcast on Spreaker.
Excellent. And, you know, Darren's talent is that he has somehow charmed his way onto some of his favorite podcasters' show instead of having his own. And so that's a talent and skill in and of itself. And somehow Darren can also show up to dance parties and just sit behind his screen and make us all laugh, just looking at him and listening to him, watching his comments in the side. On New Year's Eve, he was the hit of my online New Year's Eve dance party just by being an absolute I don't even know, buffoon on a certain level in the comments section. So well done, Darren. All right, we're going to wrap up this segment. We'll see you guys on the other side.